Welcome into Daily Faceoff Live, your go-to source for everything hockey. Live every weekday at noon Eastern.
It was a record-setting night in the NHL. We're going to get to all that and more. Welcome into Daily Faceoff Live on Thursday, December 8th. I'm Tyler Yaremchuk. Frank Saravalli is riding shotgun today. And Frank, I'm assuming you're doing good, but there's no way you're doing as good as Tage Thompson is today, right?
What a night. It's like that picture of him holding the 5 pucks at the end of the night is the ultimate just throw it on the table and check it out. What a humble brag that is.
Yeah, unbelievable. So let's not waste any time. Let's start 2 minutes and 30 seconds up on the clock and start with Tage Thompson, because there are three people who I think slept unbelievable last night. Tage Thompson himself, Sabres GM Kevin Adams, because he can sit there and go, hey, I got this guy locked up. He's not going anywhere. And three would just be anyone who has him in fantasy hockey, because the rest of your matchup is going to be an absolute cakewalk. 5 goals for Tage Thompson. We flashed up the photo of him posing with all his teammates who had assists on those 5 goals. I mean, Frank, this guy had a hat trick by the 12:22 mark of the first period. That is absolutely bananas. He had 4 goals by the end of the opening frame. And then, well, his ice time, as you can see here, he only ended up playing 13 minutes and 56 seconds. But what can you say about Tage Thompson, who has taken the leap from potential one-hit wonder to, I think, superstar this season?
Well, I can say 2 things. One, my only disappointment from Tage Thompson's night is you get a look at their coach, Donnie Meatballs, handing out 5 pucks. I don't know how he had room for all that. Those must be some pretty deep pockets there for Mr. Granato. But my only disappointment is that Tage Thompson barely played in the third period, 3 minutes and 55 seconds, as he had an opportunity to chase an NHL record. You never know. That Columbus team, they looked like they were beaten up and had given up by the time 5 minutes had worn past in that game, which was, by the way, nationally televised in the U.S. And I was thinking, what an odd game to choose. And boy, was TNT ever rewarded with the night that Tage Thompson put up. And the other thought process I have, Tyler, is how much shame I'm feeling in doubting this contract for Tage Thompson that he signed with the Buffalo Sabres. 7 years, $50 million signed last summer. And I was saying to myself, this guy's coming off of a 38-goal, 68-point season. Why did the Sabres need to sign him to this contract? What if it was such a statistical outlier for him? Look at some of the other years that he had: 14 points, 12 points, 8 goals was his previous career high before last season. What an incredible risk that was. But man, what a bargain that contract looks like right now for the Buffalo Sabres. A guy that's 6'6", that does just about everything and seems so nonchalant as he blew a 100-mile-an-hour shot past the Columbus netminders, one of which you saw a second tour of duty in that game.
Yeah, and what a rare thing that is to happen as well. You have Tage Thompson's numbers up here. He's the prime example of a late bloomer, right? He's the perfect description of that. 6'6", 220 pounds. He always seemed like he had the physical tools. It was just a matter of piecing them all together. And yeah, if the Sabres, if they wouldn't have locked him up, I mean, Frank, we'd probably be looking at, what, a 10 million plus AAV this coming off season?
Probably not quite that high, but certainly way north of the 7.1 that the Sabres signed him at. And man, you look at his season so far, only 2 players in the National Hockey League have more goals: Connor McDavid and Jason Robertson. An incredible start to the year for Tage Thompson.
Yeah, and if you were someone who bet the over last night in Columbus and Buffalo, Tage Thompson said, I got you. Let's move along to a team that was on the opposite end of the emotional spectrum from them, and that was the Arizona Coyotes last night, ending a record-setting 14-game road trip, Frank. Yes, they had a couple of chances to stop back at home, as you can see on the map here, but man, I mean, from Arizona over to the East Coast, and then you're back to play Vegas, and then you're going out to play Nashville and Carolina and Detroit, and then you're going back and going up to Canada, as you can see at the very top. They finish it up, and if there's ever a night where you can excuse a team getting drubbed 8-2, I think the final stop in a 14-game road trip is one of those moments where it's like, yeah, we'll cut the Coyotes a little bit of slack, because this was just a crazy run in the schedule, Frank.
Yeah, if you're counting along at home, 14 games on the road, 12 different states and provinces covered, and they just looked out of gas, which coincidentally enough, they had a little fun on their broadcast because this road trip had gone on so long, that they basically had quizzed a bunch of players. Hey, what hotel did we stay in when we were in New York? Do you know what state we happened to stop to refuel in on our way back to Arizona because our plane couldn't make it all the way back? Oh yeah, that was Kansas. So add a 13th state or province to the list. And some of the guys had no idea on the questions. That's how long it's been. It's been a really tough year for the Coyotes already when just looking at this trip. And we kind of knew it would happen that way with the construction ongoing at Arizona State's Mullet Arena. They got a chance to kind of partially move in with 4 games that they played at home in late October and early November. But now they can finally settle in, and they've got 37 of their last 58 games of the season to be played at home, where they can kind of get used to their temporary home now. So the real upshot for them is a chance to get to see Jacob Chychrun continue to play well. He's been really good to start. And this season is all about the best draft position possible. So 7, 13, and 4 is their mark through basically the first third of the season. 28th place in the league in points percentage, as you can see on your screen. And all things considered, probably a quality start if you're Bill Armstrong and your staff.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I made the comment earlier about people who slept good last night. I'm sure all the members of the Arizona Coyotes, once they get back into their own beds, will sleep fantastic. And as you touched on, I don't think anyone in that front office is losing too much sleep over the fact that they lost, 11 or 10 of their final 11 games, or 11 of their final 12, sorry, is the number on that road trip. It was a tough run for the Coyotes, but kind of like ripping a Band-Aid off. At least you get a ton of home dates down the stretch here and in the back half of the season. Sticking with last night's games, Dan Vladar, what a run he's been on for the Calgary Flames. And we have it titled here as Steals the Crease. And when you look at the recent results, 4 straight wins, a 900 or better save percentage in 3 of those 4 victories. The player they acquired a couple summers ago, 25 years old, signed him to a 2-year extension as well. He's starting to turn some heads and get some attention, especially when you consider how Jacob Markstrom's playing. In 17 starts this season, Markstrom has had a sub-900 save percentage in 11 of them. Frank, is it fair to say Daniel Vladar is going to be the Flames starter for the next little bit here?
He would be if I was running the Calgary Flames or coaching that team, because he's earned it. He's been that good in this stretch. It's 3 straight starts, and if you're scoring at home, it's 6 of the last 8 games that he started for the Calgary Flames. And I think he's been a big reason why that team has been able to inch up a little bit closer in the standings after a tough start to the year. He's settled down their crease, and I think he should run with the ball until he drops it at this point. I don't call it a goalie controversy because there seems to be absolutely no controversy if you watch the interactions between Vladar and Markstrom, who appears to be incredibly supportive. You see Markstrom on the ice after their win on Wednesday night, celebrating with Vladar. You see him talking to Vladar in between stoppages and timeouts, giving tips and pointers, a thumbs up here or there. I think stuff like that goes a long way. And if you're a good teammate and you have a good relationship with the guy that you're sharing the tandem with and sharing the load with, that can really help your overall team dynamic, especially at a time when the Calgary Flames need it. I think there's other positive signs to point to if you're Calgary. You see some things in this homestand as they reeled off a few wins. Jonathan Huberdeau playing a bit better, making more creative plays with the puck. It looks like he's beginning to settle in. You'd like to see more of that from Mackenzie Weegar too, but you needed your goaltending to be a lot better with Jacob Markstrom having a sub-900 save percentage to this point in the season. And clearly, the Flames think a lot of Vladar to get a contract extension with him done really kind of in the first couple weeks of this season to not only provide themselves with cost certainty in case Vladar took off, but also to have an incredible asset that they could potentially trade at some point if some team sees the same run that Vladar's on now as a future number 1, because that's how a lot of people inside the Calgary Flames organization view Vladar, as a potential and surefire number 1 at the NHL level.
Yeah, I remember early in the season when we were talking about options for the Toronto Maple Leafs when it looked like their goaltending situation was up in the air. And you mentioned Vladar, like you said, that contract would give him a ton of value around the league. But if you're the Flames, Frank, 2 more years, $2.2 million to have a high-end backup for Jacob Markstrom, who we know can be a little inconsistent. Why would you ever move on from that, right? Like in today's NHL, you need a duo. I would be keeping Vladar all the way.
Yeah, I think the only time this gets really interesting is what if Markstrom's game can't recover? And we're still a long way off from that. And maybe this time that Vladar is handling things in the crease gives Markstrom a chance to hit the reset button and really work and hone in on the technical aspects of his game.
Injuries happen to every team throughout the season, but every season we have a couple of teams who always get hit harder. And right now, that is the Colorado Avalanche, Frank. You take a look at Daily Faceoff and what's going on with their injuries. I'll rattle them off for you. Gabriel Landeskog, Darren Helm, Valeri Nichushkin, Josh Manson, Nathan McKinnon, Bowen Byram, Evan Rodriguez, Arturi Lehkonen. It was hard for me to get them all out in one breath, but they are very banged up right now, Frank. And the forward group they're icing is just, it looks so far from a team that's contending for the Stanley Cup. And I know some of these guys could be returning in relatively short order, but how concerned should the Avs be that maybe they won't be able to make it through this without their place in the standings taking a significant hit?
Well, it's not just the quantity of players, as you pointed out, it's also the quality of players because almost all of them are significant impact players on the defending Stanley Cup champs. And the nice thing, if you can call it that, if you're sitting in the GM's chair as Chris McFarland is in his first year of the Colorado Avalanche, is that they got off to a 13-9-1 start before Nathan McKinnon went out. So that's provided them at least a little bit of cushion, not a ton in the standings, to the point where they can kind of weather this for the next few weeks. And you look at their roster, like, I'm living, eating, breathing, sleeping NHL hockey, and there's a couple guys on this list that I've never heard of. Like, I have no idea who Sampo Ranta is, and perhaps I should. Cal Burke, like, I've never seen these guys play. But the point is, no organization should have to dig this deep in a normal season, playing 23 forwards already at this point, as they did on Wednesday night with their 23rd forward entering the lineup. That's bananas country at this point in the season already. We're just, about a third of the way through on December 8th. And the tough part for the Avs is they're also expected to get almost all of these guys back in relative short order. We're talking weeks and or a couple months at the longest. So when you're looking at that, it's hamstringing the Avs on exactly what they can do to help their team in the short term. You can't go out and trade for a significant piece because then you need to account for all of these players to come back off of LTIR and drop back onto your cap. And as it was put to me earlier this week by someone close to the Colorado Avalanche, would trading for one player right now really make a big difference? And my answer to that question was, well, I guess you'd have to tell me who that player is before I can give you a proper answer, because maybe one player, wink, wink, could really help if it's someone of significance. I think the Avs have a big move at the trade deadline in their future, but I think they've got a lot of work to do to get to that point. I'm thinking someone along the lines of Jonathan Taves to address that second line center option that's been a hole for them to this point in the season, but they need to just survive until then.
They do still have their first round pick in this upcoming NHL draft, which is interesting. A team that won the Stanley Cup last year, you think, oh, they've probably dug so far into their futures, and granted, no second, third, or fourth round picks for the Colorado Avalanche, but having that one big bullet in the chamber, you're right, it makes it very intriguing. You mentioned, salary cap and just trying to juggle that. Big reason why they can't just go out right now and find someone who's available and plop them into this lineup. How do you see Joe Sakic and Chris McFarland, who is their GM now, having to sort of walk that balance? Is there anyone on that roster you look at and go, they're the piece you can move out to free up some money?
I mean, not really. Like, there's, maybe someone on their back end if they're willing to get creative and trade a player to then, free up some of that space. But I don't think someone like Eric Johnson, for instance, is going anywhere. So I don't see a lot of real movable assets. And up front, a lot of them are key critical pieces that I don't think you'd want to. So what they're going to have to do at the deadline is get pretty creative in terms of trying to have third-party teams involved to then eat up some of this salary. If you were to go after a guy like Taves, for instance, to chop him down to $2.5 or $2.75 million to then be able to fit him onto your team.
working on a little technical problem right now, Frank. So another question I'll throw your way, because I mean, there are a lot of teams around the league right now who would love to be going out and making a move and bolstering their team in early December instead of waiting until March, or teams like the Avs who are banged up. You mentioned Taves and finding a way to get a guy like that and his cap hit down to 2.75, 2.5 million in that range. Could this truly be the year of the third party broker when you look around the league and just see how many teams are struggling with the cap and are either right up against it or already working in the LTIR space?
It might be the last year of the third party broker, because we are expecting the cap to go up at some point, and that's really been a vehicle used during this frozen flat pandemic cap related world. So I think ideally teams would not like to pay twice in order to then, it's more assets that are out the door in order to fit in a player. But if they need to, by any means necessary, if you're a team like the Colorado Avalanche with the playoff success you just had, knowing you have a real opportunity with Nathan McKinnon and these guys in their exact prime, especially before McKinnon's deal jumps from 6.3 to 12.6, exactly doubling this offseason before it kicks in next year. You want to do everything you can while you still have a kick at the can to then chase that second straight Stanley Cup.
Going to pull a little audible here, Frank, and get to our daily inbox question today. Hashtag AskDFO. And we talked a lot about Tage Thompson and the way this move, or the way he was brought into Buffalo, was amazing. When you look back at that Ryan O'Reilly deal and you compare those sort of two sides in this move. St. Louis got O'Reilly. They won a Stanley Cup. You don't trade that for anything when you get a chance at Lord Stanley. On Buffalo's perspective, it's like, hey, now as we look to emerge out of this long rebuild we've been in, we have a legitimate star number one center. The deal was a true win-win. When you look back through recent memory in the NHL, what's your what's the first win-win deal that pops into your head?
I don't think you have to look too far or to a different franchise to really find one. And it's last season with the Buffalo Sabres for me, trading Jack Eichel, a guy that was clearly reached the end of his road with the medical issues that he had with the Sabres and disagreement. Also his cap hit and how big of an issue that was for a player that was mostly disgruntled and had a significant medical issue and a huge cap hit. To be able to really get anything in return, let alone someone that came in and really helped their team last year, and the vibes in Alex Tuch, a Western New York native, plus a former first-round pick in Peyton Krebs, and a first-round pick, and I believe a second that has not been drafted yet. It's still a ways off from being a total win-win, because Jack Eichel has looked really good. But I think you could have a real debate and discussion at this point as to which team won the deal, which probably gives you a pretty good indication that it was probably pretty balanced.
Yeah, and I looked back through the last 3-4 years of trades, and I agree with you. There's no better example of a deal that could work out to be a win-win than that Eichel deal. But there's another trade that's on the total opposite side of this that I looked at, and it's the three-way deal between Philly, Nashville, and Vegas, where Philly got Ryan Ellis, and he's barely been able to play for them, unfortunate injuries. Vegas gets Nolan Patrick, and you're thinking, he's going to go reunite with Kelly McCrimmon, and it'll be this great story. He's barely played for Vegas, unfortunate injuries. And Cody Glass, great story making the team, has 1 goal in 24 games at the NHL level over the last 2 seasons. That's probably the most unfortunate deal, where all 3 GMs are sitting there going, that really didn't go the way we wanted it to.
I think we call that a lose, lose, lose.
Lose, lose, lose. Absolutely. All right. We are ready to go with our friend Cam Charron and the Number Crunch. So let's get into today's big segment. Always a pleasure to be joined by our friend Cam Charron for the Number Crunch, delivered by DoorDash. And Cam, we want to start with the team that you used to work for, former Leafs analyst. And it's funny, early in the year, we were sitting here going, what are the Leafs going to do between the pipes? Matt Murray's banged up. Samsonov was banged up. But now we're at the point where, are we looking at the Leafs as a team with a potential elite goaltending duo?
Probably not, to be honest. However, they've just been so good compared to not only expectations, just relative to the rest of the league. Like, we're looking at, I've talked before about how bad, not bad, but how save percentage. It's just fallen across the league. But the Leafs are pushing above 930 in terms of save percentage, even 940 here. Here we're looking at how the Leafs have done relative over the last 25 games to league average. And you see that since the start of the 2019-20 season, that they are right now kind of in uncharted territory. This is as good as it's ever been for them relative to the rest of the league, especially in the Sheldon Keefe era. And it's interesting. I think that Murray and Samsonov have looked very, very good between the pipes. They've looked very confident. They're stopping a lot of rebounds, and they're just making life easy on defense. But the other thing, too, is that the Leafs play a system, particularly a defensive system, that is kind of underrated in terms of how easy it makes life for their goalies. They don't see a lot of rebounds. They don't face a lot of screens. Defenders are able to get their sticks in the shooting lanes pretty quick and kind of disrupt those shooters. So goaltending is a really complicated thing to analyze, but the fact that the Leafs are having so much success just points to the fact that they kind of had that they're kind of playing this good team defense. And it's not just Murray, it's not just Samsonov, but Eric Kallgren was able to have some success. And we also see that now that Jack Campbell's away from this system and kind of in Edmonton a little bit more exposed, he's really starting to struggle. I know that Oilers fans don't like to hear that, but this is it's interesting just how good the Leafs goaltending tandem has been, despite everyone seeing it as a weak spot going into the year. There's no guarantee this will continue, but just the fact that they've exceeded expectations by this much early on is a good sign.
Yeah, Cam, I think what's been really interesting to me is that the team defense has been able to remain really strong despite all the guys that they're missing on their back end, which is really kind of, you add all those things up, plus the previous issues that these goalies have had, and it seems like some kind of voodoo magic for the Leafs. But they're already up to third in points percentage in the league, Cam. The problem is one of the teams that's above them in the standings is also in their division, the Boston Bruins. And stop me if you've heard that story before, whether it's the Leafs, trying to chase down the Bruins or the Lightning and some of the issues that they've had with both teams in the playoffs. But do they have any chance of catching Boston in the standings?
They're only 5 points back, I think, when I checked, but they played a couple more games. It's a really tough task, and just looking at the 5-on-5 goals for percentage, which is probably the best indicator at this point in the season of how things are going to play out later on. Boston also, not included in this. Boston has an absolutely elite penalty kill right now. So, and it's been them in New Jersey just all season long, pushing above 65% in terms of goals for percentage. And then you see a big drop off to the Leafs, who are actually third now. They had a really slow start offensively, but they seem to have picked it up. They're pushing close to league average over the last few games, but it's still just not quite been enough to even catch up and be in the same stratosphere as where the Bruins are. Funny enough, we also see the Kraken there. I don't think anyone saw that coming either, but that's an aside. For the Bruins, though, what's been interesting for me when looking at this team is that it's they used to be a one-line team. They had that perfection line, Pasternak, Bergeron, Marchand, going for so many years, and they really struggled without those guys on the ice. And they've kind of gone away from that. They traded for Taylor Hall and then re-signed him at the deadline a couple of years ago, and that's kind of given them not only a good second line, but it's also pushed down some good players onto their third line as well. So their bottom six is actually succeeding a lot more than it used to, and I was very surprised when I looked it up yesterday night who their leader in 5-on-5 points rate is, and it's not Hall and it's not Marchand or Pasternak. It's actually Trent Frederick. And his line, he's actually been playing with Taylor Hall recently. His line with Coyle and Hall last night, they put up 2 of the 4 goals at 5-on-5 for the Bruins last night, and they're winning in Colorado. So what's really interesting for me there is that the Bruins are getting a lot of success from the bottom 6. In previous years, they'd be lucky to be above 50% when all of Marchand, Bergeron, and Pasternak are off the ice, and they've been up to 65% this year. Here we are. However, where I'm kind of worried for Boston is that the scoring chances hasn't really improved along with the goals for, so we might be seeing a bit of a shooting percentage, a little bit of a bender going in. They like I said, they're scoring over 3 goals per 60 when they were normally lucky to break 2. So we're seeing a huge increase in their offense, but not really in their scoring chances created. So, it's one of those things, kind of like the Leafs goaltending. You have to enjoy it while it lasts, and good that they're getting the results. But yeah, I'm not entirely sure that the Bruins' level of success is sustainable. It's one thing if we were looking at that for the Bergeron or Pastrnak lines, but that's not really the case. We're seeing that with guys like Trent Frederick, and I don't really know if he's able to sustain this offense over the course of a full season. We'll see. Weirder things have happened in hockey, but the Bruins are a pretty formidable team, and it's also true that with that line on the ice, they're not, or with any of the big 3 on the ice, they're not getting as many goals as they did in the past, but the scoring chance numbers are still there. So maybe they're just going to regress a little on both sides.
Cam, as always, appreciate the insight. Love taking a deep dive into the numbers with you. The Number Crunch delivered by DoorDash. You can use that promo code GameDay25, get yourself 25% off, and no delivery fees on your first order of $15 or more when you download the DoorDash app. Chat next week, man.
All right. See you guys.
Rolling right into our PointsBet daily bets today. Yesterday, Elias Pettersson with an assist late in the third, nailed that. Also went over 1.5 with the OT winner and gave me the Canucks money line win. So I am all in on the Elias Pettersson fan club this morning. Let's see if I can roll that into some success tonight. Couple of matchups I'm eyeing up courtesy of our friends at PointsBet Canada, starting with Nashville taking on Tampa Bay. Both Brian Elliott and UC Saros, who are the 2 expected goalies tonight, they've allowed 3+ goals in 4 of their last 5 appearances. Tampa Bay has even scored 17 goals in their last 5, and this line is set at an even 6. Love the over there. Love the Roman Josi shot prop as my prop in this game. And for Toronto, it's hard to find value on them most nights. But Michael Bunting, how about this? Not just a 6-game point streak for Michael Bunting in this matchup you see at the top, but a 6-game assist streak. So I'm going a full unit on Bunting to get a point, which is paying out -135. Tremendous considering he's on their top line. And he's +140 to grab an assist. I'm throwing half a unit on that as well. So it's the over in Nashville, Tampa, the Roman Josi shot prop, and Bunting to get both an assist and a point in that matchup tonight. And with that, Frank, we wrap up the show with a little bit of garbage time. What do you got today?
Yeah, and I'll keep it brief, but number 8 is 99 goals away from number 99. So Alex Ovechkin, in his chase and pursuit of the NHL's all-time goal-scoring mark, we've reached another milestone. He is 6 away now from second place all-time, with Gordie Howe sitting at 801. And as I said, 99 away from Wayne Gretzky. And that means that the watch is on, because the projection, if you look at it, on pace for 44 goals this season, puts him somewhere around 2 calendar years from right now. So I'm thinking mid-December of 2024 is when we're seeing potentially that record fall if Alex Ovechkin continues at this current pace of, 0.52, 0.53 goals per game, which seems eminently doable for him around that 40 to 45 goal pace. Man, could happen before the new year in 2025, which would be pretty incredible.
That would be absolutely wild. And we'll be here to break it all down in 2025. Thanks for tuning in to another edition of Daily Faceoff Live. That's a wrap on today's show. We are back tomorrow, noon Eastern, with a Friday edition of the show. Chat with you then.
Thanks for tuning in to Daily Faceoff Live. Make sure you hit the subscribe button to never miss an episode.